Hi students, this is the troubleshooting video that I promised to post to give you some feedback on a few of the draft assignments for the interview memo dossier that was signed a few weeks ago, and the draft was due this week. So I've looked at several of the drafts and I'm going to talk through 3 of them in this video. So I have one up on the screen right now. I've blocked off the student's name at the top. I'm just going to scroll through it. So this is the first page. This is the memorandum that begins the document. So this student begins by saying this memo is to inform you about communication specialists and their importance in the business world. More specifically, give information about 2 communication specialists from Sandy National Labs, Amy Treese and Jan Miller. So that does sort of give a broad statement followed by a specific statement, but I would probably recommend doing away with a statement quite as broad as the first one. The second sentence is more on target. However, it is not a grammatically complete sentence. So the student needs to revisit that, revise the first sentence, make the second sentence complete, and probably add a third sentence that adds more precision to what the purpose of this whole assignment is. So the student moves into an analysis of what these 2 communicators do. The student begins the analysis by saying something about Amy's educational background, talking about Jan's background as well, summarizing some of the things that they said in the interview session that were most significant. And then the student moves into a little bit more analysis and some conclusion. I want to be sure that everybody's looking back at the assignment itself to make sure that you're doing everything you need to do in the memo itself. And I will return to that prompt at the end of the video, and we'll revisit it together at the end of the video. So after the memo, which is 2 pages, the student goes into the transcript. So the student does a really nice job actually with this. Student 1 asks a question, and then Amy's answer and Jan's answer. If you look at interview transcripts online, you'll find that after the first instance of an interview subject's full name, often it's just the initials that are used. Also, if this is a transcript, quotation marks don't need to be used. The student uses a whole lot of quotation marks, sometimes even within a specific answer. Like there are 2 separate quotation marked or 3 separate quotation marked items in this block here. It's all part of the same answer, so there don't need to be these internal end quote beginning quotes because the ellipsis suggests that it just continues. So this is largely fine. This transcript is fine, and the student adds some commentary about what happened when he or she took content out, and that's pretty good too. And then the student includes some notes that the student took to prepare for the meeting. There should be some other references in here, not just to textbook chapters, because I asked you guys to do some internet searches and some sort of scholarly research about this general subject to prepare for the interview. So you're going to want to show that you had a broader lens than just the materials that I assigned you. All right, so here's the second one. Let me see here. Okay, so this is the, oh, you can see whose this is at the top. Okay, so this is another memo. This memo, while it has a lot of really good content, basically is poaching from the interview transcript. Now, the interview transcript is a detailed repeating of the words that were said during the interview. That doesn't need to happen again in the memo. The memo should be more of a summary of what happened. So for there to be content for shared question 1, 2, 3, 4 in this way, that does take a lot of the oomph out of the transcript itself. This needs to narrate more rather than quote from. I know that in the video that I included with the assignments release, I showed one example of a student who did it more this way, following the shared questions as a way of organizing the memo. It doesn't work quite as well as taking a more holistic view of the interview itself and what it is supposed to teach you and teach the person for whom you're writing about the field considered more largely in a broader context. So I would ask this student to revise this memo so it's not taking so much from the interview. It's instead providing more analysis and broader connections to other contents from our class and from the field. Okay, so the student also is squishing things together a little bit too much. When something is single spaced, as this memo is, it makes a cleaner reading experience for the audience to not have the tab indentation at the beginning of each paragraph. If everything is aligned tidily to the left, that's easier for the eye to view. And if that strategy is used, then double spaces need to be included between major sections so the eye can easily scan and detect that the content is changing from one subject to another. Okay, so this is relatively robust. And the student does actually refer to the TC Bach up here, and that's great. That shows that the student is connecting to outside resources, which is exactly what I asked you to do. That needs to be integrated throughout and probably doubled down on in the conclusion so that the student can make some lasting commentary about the relationship between what this subject, Faith Tinnen, said about her career and what other people concerning technical communication say about the career. For example, the student mentions the STC, which is something that Faith Tinnen discussed, as well as the TC Bach, which was mentioned above. Now, here is the student's transcript. Now, this transcript is, again, harder for the eye to scan because things are so squished together. Using some white space strategically between questions and answers can make this easier to scan. All right, and I'm assuming that these indented Q's and A's beneath the primary Q's and A's are suggesting a hierarchy of information, that these are secondary questions, perhaps follow-up questions, but that is not necessarily clear from the design of this document. This is pretty good, though. I just think that the formatting could be adapted somewhat. But the student is using these square brackets really usefully to fill in words that are maybe unclear or removed when Faith was just talking in person. The student uses the square brackets to explain what's missing. So, like if a pronoun is vague, like here, I think that it's rough, and the it's is vague, so the student says developing training material. So that's a really great strategy to write a clear memo. Okay, and so here's the interview research. So info about Faith Tinnen, info about genre theory, great. The student looked at the TC Bach, info about proposal and writing grants, great, and this is exactly what I'm looking for. Great, so this research is really exemplary, this part here. Okay, so finally, here we have one other student's memo. Nice style here. This is another student who was at the Amy Treese and Jan Miller interview. The student refers to the textbook. Now, a textbook should be highlighted, not in quotation. I'm sorry, not highlighted, italicized. Excuse me, not in quotation marks. The student gives an overview of the contents that were discussed and then provides an analysis. Some more connections need to be made to those outside resources that I asked you to look into in order to prepare for the interview. So here's the transcript. Now, this one I really want to dwell upon for a moment because this student offers the bios for the interview subjects, which is great, but then moves into question, answer, and the strategy changes a bit. Question and the question share a line, and then answer doesn't have a colon like question does, it just has a period, and then there's a double space down, which doesn't convey uniformity of style. Now, what you would also notice if you read this carefully is that the student is summarizing the answer. The previous two examples that I showed you were transcript, which is what I asked you for. It's verbatim. It's coming from the first person. It's as if Faith Tinnen is answering a question and is saying, I did this, I do this. Now, this student is recapturing this in a summary fashion by saying, Jan Miller does this, she says this, Amy Treese echoes this. That was not what this assignment was. This assignment asked you to do a transcript. So if the student has more detailed notes or even has an audio recording, the student can go back and recreate this in the genre that I was asking you to use, which is transcript. Okay, scrolling on. So this one has a few design and actually some strategic problems that need to be addressed. So here are the research notes that the student wrote out and included an image, and it's fine to do it that way. But this needs to perhaps be a little bit more clear and maybe a little bit more extensive. The one that I showed you second is ideal. This is really excellent. It shows a lot of preparation on the part of the student. So I am going to let me see here. And we can see that I have Marcos's up. I already revealed his identity by showing you that the second one, his was the really very strong one, so I hope he doesn't mind that. But here's the prompt. We'll just pull it up quickly just to refresh everyone's memory. So next week, the final draft is due, and so they're the research questions, and what I'm asking you to do, you had to prepare by doing some research in advance, and in your memo, this is what you need to read again. Regarding the research sources, your memo should quote from and discuss 2 additional sources beyond the SME interview. Okay, and so you did that research because I asked you to do it before the interview. Your memo needs to attend to that too as well. All right, so that is the point that I just wanted to highlight in the assignment itself. And so now you've heard me narrate through 3 students' examples, 2 who remained anonymous and 1 who I accidentally revealed, but it was a really strong one. And there you go. If you have any questions at all, just reach out to me this week, and I'm happy to help you individually on any problems you're having polishing up your assignment for final submission